Number 10.
The Babushka Lady. After the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the footage provided by a witness was carefully examined for clues as to the identity of the killer. Unexpectedly, the film also featured a woman standing on a grassy knoll wearing a brown coat and scarf. Since she looked like a Russian grandmother Babushka, she was labeled the Babushka Lady. She appeared to be filming the scene, and she continued to do so even though most of the crowd fled after the shooting. She eventually wandered east on Elm Street, where she disappeared from history forever. The FBI asked the woman to come forward, but she never did. Her true identity and possibly her involvement in the crime remain unknown to this day.
Number 9.
The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer active in Northern California for 10 months in the late 1960s. He is believed to have killed at least 5 people and injured 2. After one of the murders, police received a phone call from a man claiming to be the killer, admitted to 2 previous murders. The man eventually sent a series of letters to the press that included ciphers he claimed would lead to his identity. While most of the codes have been broken, 18 letters remain unresolved. Ciphers did not help the police, and the identity of the killer was never determined. The main suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, was never convicted despite a huge amount of circumstantial evidence against him.
Number 8.
Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is probably the most famous serial killer in the history. He was active in the second half of 1888 in London. He committed his crimes mainly in the poor area of Whitechapel, and his victims were typically prostitutes. In some cases, the bodies of the victims were discovered only a few minutes after the Ripper left the scene. Despite a long list of suspects, the police have never been able to find out the identity of the notorious killer.
Number 7.
The Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is a book written in the Middle Ages in an unknown language using an unknown alphabetic system. Attempts have been made to interpret the document for more than 100 years, but there has not been a single breakthrough. The book includes plant illustrations, some unknown to modern botanists, and astronomical information. The book may have been the work of an alchemist who used the codes to keep his discoveries private, but until the book is deciphered, no one knows for sure.
Number 6.
COMTE SAINT-GERMAIN. The Earl of Saint-Germain was a mysterious man of the 18th century, an expert in music, art, and alchemy. His origin was unknown, and he eventually disappeared without a trace. He was rumored to have discovered an elixir of youth, and several people in recent years have claimed to be him. Some people also believe that he has appeared throughout history as various historical figures, such as Saint Joseph, Plato, and Roger Bacon.
Number 5.
The Black Dahlia. In 1947, Elizabeth Short's body was discovered cut in 2 pieces in a Los Angeles parking lot. The then unidentified woman was dubbed the Black Dahlia by the press after a movie she was making called The Blue Dahlia. The investigation into Short's murder was one of the largest in the history of the city. However, despite this, the killer's motivation and identity were never discovered.
Number 4.
The TAOS hum. TAOS hum is a high-pitched sound that can be heard in various parts of the world, but especially in the United States and Europe. It is described as a distant motor and is not detectable by microphones and other electronic monitoring equipment. It is most famous for its presence in Taos, New Mexico, the city from which it takes its name. In 1997, the US Congress asked scientists and observers to find the source of the sound, as they were unable to do so.
Number 3.
The Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was a 280-ton ship launched in Nova Scotia in 1860. When the ship was 10 years old, it was purchased from a shipyard for $3,000 and used to transport alcohol from the United States to Genoa, Italy. The ship was eventually discovered floating in the middle of the Strait of Gibraltar with no one on board and no signs of a struggle. All the documents were missing except the logbook. In 1973, 2 lifeboats containing 6 bodies and an American flag were found off the Spanish coast. The bodies were never identified, but it is speculated that they may have been members of the crew of the Mary Celeste.
Number 2.
The Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is a large area of ocean in the North Atlantic that has been the source of many disappearances of planes and ships. Several explanations have been offered for the mystery, including bad weather, time deformations, and alien abductions. There is substantial documentation showing that many of the disappearances were exaggerated, but even if excluded from the total count, the chances of disappearance are higher in the triangle than elsewhere.
Number 1.
The Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is presumably the funerary shroud of Jesus Christ mentioned, bearing the image of a crucified man. Despite much scientific research, there is no explanation as to how the image may have been printed on the fabric. No attempt to replicate the image was successful. The radiocarbon evidence traces it back to the Middle Ages, but its existence has been known since at least the 4th century, and the evidence of pollen and fabrics places it at the time of Jesus. It is interesting to note that both the shroud and another cloth seem to have been placed on the same man and contain traces of the same blood group, rare in medieval Europeans but common in Middle Eastern peoples.